Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're skipping the usual agenda and jumping straight into a story about a relationship that's literally 10,000 years in the making. It's an incredible look at ecology, culture, and the massive clash between ancient traditions and modern commercial industries. We're going to explore how the indigenous Linkaит people of Southeast Alaska use ceremony and collective action to protect a sacred fish. And honestly, what that teaches us about restoring our own relationship with the natural world is absolutely crucial. So let's get right into it. Okay, let's dive into this with a really beautiful story from the original instructions of the Tlingit people. According to this tradition, there was a young woman from the Kiks-Adi clan who went down to the shore and spent hours just serenading the herring. Now, others actually called her lazy as she lay on the rocks singing, and eventually she dozed off in the sun with her hair floating in the water. But when she woke up, her hair was completely filled with herring eggs. They had been beckoned by her songs, and they recognized her respect. This micro-myth is so important because it establishes the deep emotional and spiritual baseline for everything we're going to talk about in this explainer. And you know, that ancient story translates into a very real, very physical reality. As the source notes, the bond between humans and herring had been forged, and the Lakit have been evolving alongside them for at least 10,000 years since. Think about that for a second. 10,000 years. This isn't just about fishing. It's a profound, ancient covenant between the people of Southeast Alaska and a species they view as truly sacred. They don't just share a habitat, right? Their cultures and their very survival have evolved completely in tandem. And this brilliantly illustrates exactly why. Herring spawn is the literal foundation of an incredibly biodiverse food web in Sitka and the broader region of Tlingit Ani. When the herring thrive, they feed everyone: the salmon, the halibut, the whales, the eagles, the bears, and of course humans. Every single spring, right as the long, freezing Alaskan winter finally breaks, the herring arrive, and it triggers this massive explosion of life. It's like a giant puzzle, and if you pull this single keystone piece out, the entire ecosystem just begins to wobble. So how exactly do the Tlingit interact with this foundational species? Well, they rely on intergenerational knowledge, and the harvest itself is deeply respectful. First, a harvester cuts a bough from a hemlock tree, but they explicitly offer thanks to the tree for giving itself to feed others. Then, the branch is submerged in the frigid ocean water. They wait for the herring to spawn, and finally, they pull those egg-covered branches back out. It's this brilliant, non-lethal, sustainable process that actually cultivates the habitat while providing food. It's not just harvesting, it's an act of deep, deep reverence. But as the source outlines, this peaceful coexistence faced massive, devastating disruption. Tracing the timeline here, colonization began in the late 1700s with Russian fur traders. Then, by 1882, these large-scale commercial fishing operations moved in, and they were aggressively targeting herring for fish oil, livestock feed, and fertilizer. The exploitation was literally so severe that Tlingit leaders say it broke the covenant between humans and herring. Fast forward to 2018, and the Sitka tribe of Alaska actually sued the state over the poor management of the herring population, but tragically in 2024, the state Supreme Court completely rejected that challenge. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the stark contrast it shows between two completely different worldviews. On one side, you have the traditional indigenous harvest. They collect eggs after the fish have spawned, which allows the herring to live and reproduce multiple times. But on the flip side, the source describes these behemoth commercial boats using massive nets to catch the female herring before they spawn. The fish are killed, they're frozen, and their egg sacs are extracted to be shipped overseas as luxury delicacies or just ground up into fish meal. So the crucial point is that this commercial system operates on a radically different scale. In 2024, the state set a guideline harvest level of a record 81,246 tons of herring. To put that into perspective, that represents roughly 20% of the presumed population. Critics argue that this volume-based maximum sustainable yield model prioritizes maximum extraction over ecology, putting the entire Sitka food web at severe risk. Between this massive commercial extraction and the mounting stress of warming oceans, the herring population, and the countless species that depend on it, is under immense, immense pressure. And the impact here isn't just ecological, right? It is deeply, deeply cultural. The Herring Protectors, which is an indigenous, women-led grassroots movement fighting for the species, explains this perfectly. They state, the extraction of the female roe as a capitalist resource parallels the genocide of our matrilineal structures and knowledge. Wow.
For them, defending the herring isn't just a standard environmental campaign. It is a fundamental fight for their own sovereignty and cultural survival against a purely extractive model. Now, this movement is guided by a beautiful core philosophy. Back in 2016, Keshit Louise Brady, who is a member of the Quixote clan, founded the Herring Protectors. And the foundation of their organizing is an original instruction called Ya Wune, which essentially means respect for all things. Brady emphasizes this really powerful strategy, ceremony as sovereignty, or ceremony as resistance. It's all about figuring out how to be in right relationship with everyone, and that includes our relatives of the land and ocean.
Let's move to and see how this builds into an absolutely incredible act of community healing, the Ku X. This is a centuries-old, multi-day ceremony that, believe it or not, was actually criminalized in 1904. It had to be kept alive in secret before being brought back in contemporary times. And in 2018, the first ever Yamu Ku X, one dedicated specifically to the herring, was held. It's this profound gathering designed to honor the dead, hold space for grief, reaffirm commitments to one another, and ultimately redistribute wealth. And the timing of that 2018 ceremony was entirely intentional. It was held to coincide with the state's Board of Fish meeting. At those government meetings, tribal elders were forced to squeeze their deep, intergenerational knowledge into these sterile, strictly timed 3-minute public testimonies, and they were often getting rudely cut off by the chair. But at the KUAX, there are no timers. None. Elders can speak for as long as they need to. It's an expansive, community-centered space that allows for true, authentic expression. Nawaya Tagaban, an activist and ceremonial mediator, points out exactly why this shift in time is so incredibly important. He says, the Ku'iks takes away the sense of urgency. In the Western cultural landscape, we get sucked into urgency. Urgency serves capitalism. He notes that if it takes 6 hours to do the grieving, well, you take 6 hours. Purposefully slowing down and rejecting that capitalist rush is exactly how the community begins to actually metabolize the massive collective grief of colonization and ecological destruction. And the mechanics of how they process this grief during the ceremony are just fascinating. In Lingit matrilineal culture, everyone belongs to one of two moieties, either the raven or the eagle. During the Koyaks, members of opposite clans literally witness and respond to each other's grief. Tagaban explains that having your opposites respond helps to put the grief away and soothe the wounds. So you don't hold the pain alone. It is held, acknowledged, and healed by the collective. And only then is it time to celebrate. Once the grieving transitions into celebration, the gathering becomes, as Louise Brady describes it, an absolute cacophony of joy for the abundance of the herring. People drum, they dance in these elaborate ceremonial robes, and they feast. And then comes the vital, joyous act of redistributing wealth. Volunteers gift the attendees everything from handmade beads and woven blankets to wild harvested salmon and literally hundreds of bags of freshly harvested frozen herring eggs, still right there on their hemlock branches. Which brings us to a beautiful rule in Lingit tradition. Herring eggs are never, ever to be bought or sold. They are only ever gifted. Vivian Mork, a traditional food and medicine teacher, sums it up perfectly. She says, if you receive herring eggs from someone, you know you're loved. For the Lingit, this perfectly captures the fundamental difference between treating nature as a commodity to be extracted for profit versus treating it as a secret relative to be respected and shared. The ultimate takeaway from these indigenous organizers is that when herring are relatives, and not just resources, the entire ecosystem benefits. When land is sacred, it's a home, no longer just property. This mindset actively protects our living systems from corporate extraction and commodification. The herring protectors show us that making time for the sacred, holding space for collective grief, and organizing your community isn't just about cultural preservation. It is a highly effective, deeply rooted form of environmental protection. As we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with a profound question posed by the organizers in the article. For those of us looking to protect our own environments, whether that's wild coastlines, dense forests, or even urban neighborhoods, we really have to ask ourselves, what is sacred to your community? What are you protecting? Because as the Lingit show us, true protection requires reverence. Thank you so much for learning with me today, and keep looking for the sacred around you.